Hello there, and welcome to episode 15 of the Unqualified Opinion Sports Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Marco Yerkovich. Joining me on today's episode is Will Byerman.
Merry Christmas from Down Under, yo. On today's episode, we'll be discussing our early NBA draft big board, the downfall of the Dallas Cowboys, and our end-of-season NFL awards, and much, much more.
But before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your unqualified opinions down below in the comments. Also, don't forget to ring the bell and check us out on Spotify. With that, let's get into today's episode. Also, forgot to mention, we are on holiday break right now, so I am the only one in studio. So throughout the episode, I've got Will calling in right now. Tim and Paul will be calling in throughout the episode. So if the audio is a bit spotty, we apologize for that, but we're just doing this over the phone right now. Again, I'm the only one in studio, so the audio might be just a little bit spotty. So we'll try and do our best with that, either right now or editing it on the back end. So we'll do our best on that. So Will, with that, let's get into your early season NBA big board. So who do you have at 5 on your list?
So first up is going to be at 5th, Denny Avdija. He's a guard forward combo guy from Israel, and his big pull is that people say he plays like Luka. I don't think he's quite there as a shooter. I don't think he's quite there as a passer. Little better of a defender than Luka was in the EuroLeague, but Avdija's 18. He's all potential, and he's playing for Maccabi Tel Aviv right now, which is a EuroLeague first-team club. So he's made some solid strides, and I'd really look for him to be a huge lottery player, especially in a weaker draft class so far.
So who do you have as 4th on your big board right now?
4 was tough. Cole Anthony is going to hang in there, point guard from North Carolina, but he's really kind of been struggling of late. I believe he's injured as well right now, and efficiency-wise, he was pretty awful at North Carolina. But if you look at to his potential, dynamic scorer, excellent passer, and the other thing too is he just has so much more experience than Avdija and Wiseman and Ball and Anthony Edwards and all these other top players. Anthony played tremendously at a bunch of, like the McDonald's All-American game and a bunch of other high school tournaments, and he's just a very mature player for his age. So if he can pull his shooting percentages together, he'd be a very efficient, very safe pick as a point guard.
All right, so who do you have in your 3rd spot?
Number 3 is another tricky one because we've had several players in the top end of this draft either go down with injuries, have other miscellaneous weirdness happen to them. And under that second category, we got James Wiseman, the center, formerly of Memphis. I really don't know what he's going to do now. He has left Memphis after one semester where he only played 3 games because he was suspended by the NCAA for recruiting violations. Wiseman, though, his issue now is just going to be proving he is ready to go in the NBA, considering he only got 3 games against college players, and he played well there. However, wasn't the best competition. He was not the most efficient player. He's still working on his 3-ball. He can handle a bit, so there's a lot of really unique, scary kind of Embiid-ish potential there. But still a little skinny, still very raw, and he's not going to have a college program to kind of mold him. And we've seen players who haven't gone to college recently, like Terrence Ferguson from Oklahoma City, who have got drafted high still. But it's just going to be interesting to see what Wiseman does, considering he's not playing anywhere for the rest of the year.
All right, so who do you have in your 2nd penultimate spot in this big board?
We'll go with the meme here, LaMelo Ball. Really at the start of the year, when people were talking about him being a potential NBA pick, I was kind of like, dear God, can we stop talking about the Ball brothers? They're not going to do anything important except Lonzo. But LaMelo really has turned that around. First, he grew a lot, but also he's playing Illawarra Hawks over in Australia. And it's a very respectable league, very good players, and a lot more physical than the NBA, actually. So it really is going to test him a lot. He's also injured right now. He went down with an ankle injury. He might miss the rest of the season over there. But he flashed some legitimate scoring skills and really great court vision. Obviously, he's still going to need to put on a bit of weight. He's still going to need to mature as a point guard. But LaMelo Ball really is looking like a legitimate top NBA prospect right now.
And then, Will, who do you have as the top spot in your early season NBA big board, your number 1 prospect?
It's going to be Anthony Edwards, the guard from Georgia. To be honest, he had his him being number one is less about how impressive he's been and more about the fact that Anthony, Wiseman, and Ball, the other contenders for the number one spot, have either been injured or unimpressive or just some weird combination of both of those. But Edwards has been solid. He's a scary player to evaluate because he's incredibly streaky. He'll go up for like 31 game on ridiculous shooting efficiency, and then the next he'll totally disengaged on defense and will shoot like 20% from three. So it's really hard to know what you're going to get with Edwards, but he has the tools to be an elite defender, and he has the tools to be an elite shooter. And the big thing, too, is he's playing that guard forward, that wing position that's most important in the NBA right now. And because of that, I think Edwards is the best player available in the NBA right now.
All right, so a very solid big board, a lot of guys to look forward to in the coming weeks and months. We'll continue to update you on his big board, even getting into mock drafts once we have a more clear understanding of where some NBA teams will fall in the draft order. We will get really into that. We'll also get into NFL mock drafts before then, as the NFL draft is a few months before the NBA draft. It's really exciting, once these actual games, once the NFL season ends and as the NBA season begins to wind down, we're going to get into that a whole lot more, a lot of those projections and mock drafts. So with that, we're going to move on to the hot take of the week, which once again, Will Byerman. So Will, what is your hot take this week?
The hot take here is a big one, especially given recent league history. But I'm going to say that this season, the Eastern Conference is better than the Western Conference. And if you're a big fan of NBA basketball, you know that, even last season, if you said that, you'd be just mocked for it. Really, East Conference wasn't even close to being nearly as good. But they really pulled it around this season, so that's my hot take. What do you think of that, Marco?
I mean, it's definitely a really hot take. I don't know. I mean, there is some merit to it. I mean, many people believe the best team in the league to be the Milwaukee Bucks. Then, of course, you've got the Celtics, the ragtag Miami Heat and Toronto Raptors, the star-studded Philadelphia 76ers. Without Victor Oladipo, the Pacers are playing really solid. The Nets are doing good. But I think overall, one, there's a big fall off after those top like 5 or 6 teams, and the West is a lot more thorough and a lot more deep. You could have a solid 12 or 13 teams you could legitimately see making the playoffs in the West. Also, the West is losing a juggernaut in the Warriors that they'll get back next season. But also, I mean, in the West, you've got the Lakers, the Nuggets, the Rockets, the Clippers, Mavericks, Jazz, Thunder, Blazers, Spurs, just a bunch of teams that could go deep in the playoffs and are among the top teams in the league. I still think the West is better than the East, but it's not as big of a margin as it's been. It's probably as close as it's been since the Boston Big Three of Ray Allen, Kevin Garnett, and Paul Pierce was still together around 2011. But I think it's the closest it's been since then.
I'm going to bring this down to the fact that the Western Conference's saving grace, or their big bragging point, has usually been, wow, look at the Eastern Conference. They have 2 teams with losing records or 500 records who are in the playoffs. And then this year they do have one. They have Orlando at 8. But in the West, they have Oklahoma City, 15-14, barely hanging in at 500. Then they have the Trailblazers, who are 14-17. And I don't think the West is really as good once you get past the Utah Jazz, who are 18-12 at number 6. The Spurs have been weirdly awful this season. They're okay on defense, but they can't score the ball at all. The Sacramento Kings really haven't pulled things together the way that we thought they would. The Suns and Grizzlies both had some hype heading into the season or at the start of the season, but they've really pulled off now. And if you bring them to the East, I just feel that their 8 is currently it's about even with the Western Conference's field, except for I think at that 7-8 spot, I'd take Nets and Magic before I take Thunder and Trailblazers. I'm also feeling like Miami, Boston, and Toronto and Philadelphia, those 4 teams that are under that number 1 seed, where obviously I do think the Bucks are the best team in the league right now. But Denver and Houston and Dallas and Utah have all had some pretty scary flaws at times of the season. It's hard to know how well to take them as a postseason contender. The 76ers have been a defensive monstrosity. And I mean that in a good way. they'll shut you down when they're fully motivated. The Raptors are just playing incredible team basketball, same for the Heat, and the Celtics are liable to catch fire and run through the playoffs. I think there's more championship potential on the eastern half of that bracket, whereas I think in the West, I think at this point only the Lakers and Clippers are really that scary as championship contenders. So I'm mostly going by the fact that I think there's more contenders in the East than there are in the West at this point.
I don't completely disagree with that, and again, I must re-emphasize that I slightly agree with you. It is the closest that it's been since, in my opinion, again, since the Boston Big Three broke up, or I guess when they were dominant, so around 2011, 2012. We could see with these young teams in the East, we could see the East retake the West, but right now I still think the West is just a little bit better. I do agree with your championship pedigree point. I think there's a lot of teams in the East that can win the title. Three, I would say, probably three. But if you look at the West, I think there's 5 or 6 teams that could win the title. So I think the West is just a little bit deeper. But overall, a very hot take, Will, but a pretty substantially well-founded one, a pretty solid one. All right, with that, we're going to say goodbye to Will and welcome in Tim Seipel to the podcast. And our first topic we're going to be discussing is the Cowboys falling to the Eagles 17-9 on Sunday, all but ensuring that the Cowboys have lost the NFC East and will not make the playoffs. So, Tim, your overall thoughts on the Cowboys season as a whole?
I mean, the Cowboys have been about as consistent as possible because they consistently start off really, really well, and then they just tail off and end horribly. This season has been an absurd failure for Jason Garrett, and more importantly, Jerry Jones. I think that goes without saying at this point, that he's allowed Jason Garrett to be coaching the Cowboys for so long and have a level of mediocrity for so long that I think the Cowboys fans are just tired of it, and they're just ready to see him go. So this has been an absolute failure, especially with the stacked roster that the Dallas Cowboys have.
So that kind of leads me into my next question for you, but obviously you have a very clear opinion on this, as do I. I think that Jason Garrett lost his job a number of weeks ago, but this, for most people, and especially Jerry Jones, was a for sure final nail in the coffin. I think Jason Garrett's job is done. I think even by some miracle, if the Eagles lose to New York and the Cowboys beat Washington and the Cowboys win the division, which again is highly unlikely, even if they win the division and make the playoffs, they'll likely be out in the first round and he'll still lose his job. But overall, the most likely scenario is regardless of their outcome on Sunday, they still lose the division and Jason Garrett is fired after a 7-9 season and an 84-68 tenure overall. So just overall, your thoughts on the potential firing and likely firing of Jason Garrett by Jerry Jones?
Yeah, Jason Garrett lost his job halfway through the season. I think we both already know that. Losing to the Bills and the Bears in a row is kind of befuddling with the roster that the Cowboys have. And so it's kind of, they've always underperformed, especially this late in the season. And I think it's just gotten to a point where it's exactly like what you said. This was just, the Eagles' loss was the nail in the coffin. It's the rivals. It's at home. And it's the nail in the coffin. He's done. I don't see him coaching another football game after this week for the Dallas Cowboys.
So with that being said, with the complete utter failure of this Cowboys season based upon the roster and the players they have and how they should have done, Jason Garrett, it's kind of a consensus not only amongst us on the podcast, but overall, I think now all NFL fans, all Cowboys fans, that Jason Garrett's job is lost. So obviously the next logical question to ask, I think, is who the next head coach of the Cowboys will be. In my opinion, there's only 2 candidates. Obviously there's more than 2 candidates, but there's only 2 that I think will really satisfy Jerry Jones completely. And I think that is Lincoln Riley, the head coach of the Oklahoma Sooners, and Urban Meyer, the former head coach of the Ohio State University. Tim, your thoughts on those 2 candidates or any others you think could be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys?
I honestly think that those are the 2 that have the best chances, and I think those 2 are probably going to be, one or the other is going to be the coach of the Dallas Cowboys after this season. I know Lincoln Riley's paying a visit to Dallas, and Urban Meyer has reportedly been interested in coaching in the NFL. I think I think the Dallas Cowboys even though it's a high pressure situation, is an attractive place to go because of the fans and the roster that they have, and they've built up for quite a few seasons.
So I know the roster is really solid right now, but what happens when a move needs to be made and you have college guys like Lincoln Riley and Urban Meyer who are used to recruiting, thus being able to pick the guys they want? And the famous Bill Parcells quote about Jerry Jones is, "If you want me to cook the meal, let me at least shop for the groceries," right? Meaning that if you want me to coach the players, at least let me pick who the players are. That being a reference to Jerry Jones notoriously being the general manager of the Cowboys for more than the last quarter century. So just your thoughts on whether those college guys could adjust to being a head coach under Jerry Jones.
I think it will be definitely difficult for them because it's a new set of pressure, and they're not all in charge. And that's the big thing with Jerry Jones. He's a very overbearing GM, not GM, but owner. He's a very overbearing executive. And so I think to a certain extent, it's going to be really difficult. And I think Jerry Jones really needs to learn how to be an owner and let the people that he pays to do their job. And it will be difficult for them, but I think that they'll get through it because Urban Meyer, fantastic coach, but I think he has great strategy when it comes to going into games. I think he's able to use the players that he has, and he's able to go past that. But honestly, Lincoln, I really think that Jerry Jones needs to get past picking their own players and give the coaches more of an opinion.
So I think that if he were to do that, which he never will, because I don't think he'll ever let his ego aside, I think the team would be a lot more successful. So Lincoln Riley, Urban Meyer, those are the top head coaching candidates for the Cowboys job. Obviously, there are many more and many other sufficient head coaches out there, but those are the top two that we think could probably bring the Cowboys to a truly elite championship level. So with that, we're going to move into my Week 16 NFL Power Rankings. So at number 10, I have the Minnesota Vikings coming off the Monday Night Football loss to the Packers, where they really did not look like much of a playoff team. Kirk Cousins once again failing in prime time. He's 0-9 on Monday Night Football, an abysmal stat for a quarterback. 9, I have the Houston Texans. They were 10 last week. I barely moved them up after they squeaked by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jameis Winston threw 4 interceptions. The Texans only won by 3. Not very impressive overall. 8, I have the Buffalo Bills. A truly tremendous performance against the juggernaut New England Patriots. They really showed out and could cause trouble in the AFC playoffs. 7, I have Seattle. Really bad loss to Arizona, but they are injury-riddled. They got Marshawn Lynch, so that could add something, or he could be real out of shape and not contribute a whole lot to this playoff run. We'll have to see. 6, the Packers really proved something to me on Monday Night Football, beating the Vikings in the way they did. Not everything was going right for them, but they found ways to win. Very impressive. Speaking of another team who we had doubts about, who found ways to win against a tough divisional opponent, the Patriots defeated the Buffalo Bills. I have them at number 5. Really solid performance overall, especially on the defensive side. 4, I've got the Kansas City Chiefs, who really demolished Chicago. Another tremendous defensive performance. Chiefs have won 5 in a row and held 2 of their last 4 opponents to no touchdowns. The defense, we'll have to see if that holds up against tougher opponents in the playoffs, but overall, Kansas City has really found their groove defensively. Again, the offense was never the problem for Kansas City. It was always the defense. 3, I have San Francisco. I think that Jimmy Garoppolo and this team could make a deep playoff run. We'll have to see what they can change overall. They've had a lot of weak points throughout the season, been really run dependent, but this defense, especially that front 7 that leads the league in sacks, we'll have to see if they can really come up big and create a lot of opportunities for the 49ers in the playoffs. Number 2, I have the Saints. I think probably one of the most consistent teams in the league, especially since Drew Brees got back from injury. So I've got them at number 2. And then number 1, this team has not moved for a great number of weeks since they knocked off the New England Patriots. I've got the Baltimore Ravens at number 1. 12 Pro Bowlers, almost every single win this season by double digits. They've won 11 straight. They've played tremendous football, and they are not only the number one seed in the AFC, but the number one team in the NFL for me. So, Tim, your thoughts on my NFL power rankings for Week 16?
Yeah, I mean, I think your power rankings right now are spot on to the point where, I mean, it is probably the best it's ever looked. I think it's funny, with the Bills at 8, as much as that's probably a good spot for them, I can't say that they will lose to any team that's ranked above them significantly. Like, I can't see any of the teams really blowing them out, and they've just continued to produce really, really effective results. And losing by 7 in Foxborough against the Patriots, that's not a small feat. I mean, that just speaks to their defense and how well they've been able to play. I think right now with the Seahawks, they're just going through unfortunate injuries, really losing Carson. They ended up losing Penny and their third string running back. And it'll be interesting to see how the Seahawks adapt, as they are a run-first offense and they're having to go to free agency to pick up some running backs. So I think it'll be an interesting situation for Russell Wilson to be put in, because he's been used to being in a running-first offense, and now more is going to fall on his shoulders as he's going to have more pressure to pass. And then I think I'm really happy with the Packers. Got to be straight up. The Packers defense looked phenomenal. They really shut down the Vikings offense, holding them the total under 140 yards. Just looked really good. Obviously, Dalvin Cook was a big miss for the Minnesota Vikings, but at the same time, the offensive line for the Vikings kind of got dominated by the Packers' defensive line, which is always good to see as a Packer fan. But the Patriots got a good win also. And so Patriots are looking good. The offense looked a little bit better this past week against a good Bills defense. And I think the Patriots defense will always be good. They've been good for this whole season, and unless any injuries come by, they're going to be about as good as it gets. So, honestly, one of the best power rankings that you've done. But it'll be definitely an interesting next couple weeks just to see how things pan out.
Yeah, again, we've been talking about this for weeks. The Patriots and Packers have been teams that have continually slipped in my power rankings, but now they finally get good quality wins. So it'll be interesting to see if they can capitalize on this momentum in the playoffs. Again, Green Bay and New England playing as good as they've played all season with really solid wins. Packers taking down a strong divisional opponent in Minnesota. Again, both teams playing teams in their division that'll make the wild card. Dominated Minnesota late, and then the Patriots, hung 400 yards on the number 2 defense in the league in Buffalo, and New England has really struggled offensively, so that was great to see. And then just up top, again, the Ravens. We cannot understate how tremendous they have played. Again, a lot of their starters are going to be sitting out in Week 17, but they deserve it as they've already clinched not only a first-round bye and the division, but the number 1 overall seed. So the Ravens, again, number 1 by a long ways. So with that, we're going to move into our NFL awards. So me and Tim are just going to give out awards to players, coaches, executives at each position. So Tim, first up, your offensive MVP for this NFL season.
I think my offensive MVP is probably the same as others. Christian McCaffrey was a close second. He had a phenomenal season. But Lamar Jackson, he's just done so well. The only thing that Lamar Jackson doesn't have is a really, really hard situation to be in. I think Christian McCaffrey's in a rough situation, as they didn't really have a quarterback all season that was very good. And so I think Christian McCaffrey probably did more with what he had. But Lamar Jackson was just electric. Passing for over 3,000 yards, rushing for over 1,200 yards, along with 43 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, 66.1% completion percentage, just about as efficient as it gets on the offensive end. That really speaks to to the players that he has around him. 12 Pro Bowl selections for the Baltimore Ravens. Just a really phenomenal group that John Harbaugh has put together. I think Lamar Jackson definitely looked the most impressive on the offensive end this whole season.
Yeah, I completely have to agree with you on that one. Lamar Jackson, by a long shot, is the NFL offensive MVP for me. As you said, I mean, just ridiculous numbers, passing and running the ball. The clear our offensive MVP, but of course he's definitely going to be named league MVP here in a few weeks at the NFL awards. It's pretty clear cut. Not only is he the best player on the best team, but they have performed pretty much the best since about week 5 when they started the season 2-2. Now they've won 11 straight. As we said in the power rankings, just a very dominant team, and it all starts with Lamar Jackson, his unique play style, his leadership on this team, and how they perform week in and week out. So with that, Tim, who do you have as your defensive MVP for this NFL season?
I think you're going to like this one. For the first time since 2009, I have a cornerback by the name of Stephen Gilmore.
Stephon Gilmore.
2 touchdowns, 19 passes defended. He has just played out this whole season. I think he's allowed about 40% completion percentage, which is phenomenal, especially as a cornerback, because there's a high volume there where he was always on players, and he's just done a fantastic job all season. He has been the best corner in the league, and along with 2 touchdowns on 6 of his interceptions, he's just put himself in the right place at the right time. Close second was Aaron Donald, but I had to give it to Stephen Gilmore because he's just looked so impressive this whole season.
Yeah, so I have to agree with you. Stephon Gilmore, the Super Bowl champion with the Patriots, is the defensive MVP for me as well, so we agree on yet another pick. As you said, Aaron Donald, a close second, and a number of other players that you could have considered for this award. But I think it's pretty clear that Stephon Gilmore, the best defender on the best defensive team, should be given this award. You talked through all his stats, but just the way he plays and the way he makes teams adapt to him instead of adapting to other teams. He's just such an aggressive force on the defensive side of the ball for the Patriots. So Stephon Gilmore is my defensive MVP for this NFL season. So, Tim, who do you have as the offensive rookie of the year?
This player has made his team so much better. He's had a couple good players around him, but the team overall, without him, wouldn't be as good as they are. And that player is Josh Jacobs. He has over 1,150 rush yards, 7 touchdowns, 4.8 yards per carry. And this stat really hit me. 3 yards after contact is what he's averaging, which is phenomenal. He did not look like a rookie out there all season. He looked phenomenal as a running back for the Oakland Raiders, and he looked about as good as it gets. Obviously, there was Kyler Murray in discussion, A.J. Brown in discussion, but nobody played out as well as Josh Jacobs, and he really was. He was one of the Pro Bowl snubs when it comes down to it, because he was one of the top 3 running backs in the AFC. So Josh Jacobs was a phenomenal player and deserves the offensive rookie of the year.
I agree with you on this one once again, and I have a feeling we're going to agree almost all the way through on all these awards because they seem pretty clear-cut. There's not a whole lot of contenders outside of the frontrunners in each of these categories. So just like you said with pretty much everything, Josh Jacobs, clearly not only the best rookie running back, but one of the best running backs in the AFC this season. In just 13 games, he had 242 rush yards for 1150. That's almost 5 yards per carry with 7 touchdowns. Just pretty ridiculous stats, not only for a rookie, but even just a running back in today's load management league when it comes to running backs. There's teams obviously with the primary backs, but a lot of teams are going by committee at the running back position. And even Oakland tried doing that at the beginning of the year, but Josh Jacobs really solidified himself as the number 1 back for Oakland. Now Las Vegas, I guess. But yeah, just a really great running back and a great player overall this season. You even went as far to say he's a Pro Bowl snub. I don't know if I go quite that far, maybe. but just a really solid player. So let's move on to another one that we might agree on, your defensive rookie of the year.
I would be upset if you do not agree with me on this one. I think it's pretty clear cut that's Nick Bosa. He's been about as good as it gets. He's come in without having any issues, and he's just fit right in with the 49ers defense. He has 9 sacks, 20 QB hits, 53 QB pressures. He just looks phenomenal all season, and he hasn't looked like a rookie. He has been dominating, and I think on the best, or one of the best defenses in the league. He has really played out this whole season. And I think a big part of what you worry about for rookies is how they do throughout the whole season. And I think he has definitely stayed healthy, and that's really important for rookies. And so I don't know if there's anybody that's looked as impressive or just dominated the line as much as he has as a rookie.
Yeah, Tim, I completely agree with. I completely agree with you. I've got Nick Bosa as my pick. As you said, a guy who definitely Pro Bowl caliber, made the Pro Bowl in just his first season. The younger brother of Joey Bosa, but he looks like he could be even better than Joey. Overall, as you said, 15 games, 9 sacks, 27 tackles, forced fumble, and just the way he impacted teams. Teams were already having to double team, triple team, prepare for him on a schematic level, which is an impact a player rarely makes this early in their career. I think he's one of the best defensive players in the league already. So just great impact right away by Nick Bosa. Clearly the front runner and winner of this award for both of us and probably for a lot of people. So with that, let's move on to one we might disagree on. Your NFL Coach of the Year.
So, for this one, it came down to 2 coaches, and those 2 coaches were John Harbaugh and Kyle Shanahan. John Harbaugh, obviously, last year had a phenomenal team, but a lot of his defensive players ended up leaving in free agency, including Zadarius Smith, which Packers are very happy that we got him. But they lost quite a few, including Charles Suggs as well. And so he really was able to build up the defensive team back up and to be almost just as good. I mean, the defense last year for the Ravens was really good, so they're not as good this year, but they've been really, really good, top 10, maybe top 8, top 5 defense this year, which has really helped the offensive end too with field position. So I was looking at him, but you got to give it to Kyle Shanahan. What he's been able to do with his team, defensively and offensively, make him both, I believe both of them are top 10 ranking in the league. It's insane. And to do it with Jimmy Garoppolo, who has struggled a lot throughout the season, but he's obviously, he's developing and he's getting better. He really has shown out. So I got to give that to Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, but I just couldn't do that. Honestly, I think I have to cheat a little bit. I have to give it to 2 coaches right now. By next week, you'll know who I would give it to. I would have to say you either have to give it to John Harbaugh for the Baltimore Ravens for the tremendous season, likely a 13-win season, maybe a 14-win season if they can win next week. And it all depends on the team they're playing. The Pittsburgh Steelers, led by Mike Tomlin, if they win, they're in. And I think, despite it wouldn't be the best record. The Steelers would go 9-7, but they would make the playoffs. I think that would be really impressive, considering the injuries and the offseason drama that the Steelers had. That Mike Tomlin would be able to right the ship and get this team to the playoffs. However, if they lose to the Ravens, who again are sitting some players for this game, Lamar Jackson, Earl Thomas, Marshall Yanda, to name a few. If they lose to the Ravens, I don't think Mike Tomlin gets Coach of the Year, and I think it goes to John Harbaugh. So essentially, what's interesting and kind of funny is I think the winner of the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game next week, this upcoming week, will decide the winner of the NFL Coach of the Year. So right now, I have to say it's either Mike Tomlin or John Harbaugh. The winner of that game decides my Coach of the Year. So with that, let's move on to the final award that we're giving out right now. the NFL Executive of the Year. Who do you have at that spot, Tim?
This might seem a little biased, but I've got GM of the Packers, Brian Gutekunst. He has really brought together this Packers team. From getting Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith, Adrian Amos in free agency, he's just done a fantastic job for this team, and it's been showing. I mean, the Packers defense has not looked phenomenal, but I think something that they go by is they bend but they don't break. They don't give up easy touchdowns as much, and they're able to stop. And that was very clear yesterday, especially when they were able to hold them to a field goal, I believe, on the 3-yard line. So, they do a really good job in holding them out, holding the other team out of the end zone. He's just the free agency pickups, the way that Matt LaFleur's been able to go about his job. I mean, I've got to give it to Brian Gutekunst because of how fast he's righted the ship. I don't think any of us saw the Packers going 12-3 in the 15 games that they played, especially the way they looked last year. So I got to give it to him.
So yeah, I'm actually going to have to go with Brandon Beane, the general manager for the Buffalo Bills. The Bills made the playoffs 2 times in the last 3 years, and in 2017 made the playoffs for the first time since 1999. Actually, the Bills have made a remarkable turnaround under his tutelage. Of course, he was the director of football operations for the Panthers from 2008 to 2014, then the assistant GM from 2015 to 2016. Obviously, we know what the Panthers did in that time, slowly built up a team that would ultimately become really, really dominant and even make Super Bowl 50. So I'm not saying that the Bills are on that same trajectory just yet, but he's done a really impressive job with the way he has drafted and the way he has managed free agency. He's done a really remarkable job of turning around what had to the point before he got there had been a just truly abysmal Buffalo franchise for nearly 2 decades to that point. So Brandon Beane just executing an amazing turnaround job in under 3 years up in Buffalo, getting them once again to the playoffs, their first 10-win season since 1999. Overall, just a tremendous, tremendous performance by Brandon Beane and the Buffalo Bills. So that's it for our NFL awards picks there. All right, with that, we're going to say goodbye to Tim and welcome into the podcast Paul Hires. And now it's time for everyone's favorite mini segment, Just the Numbers with Paul Hires.
Hey, Marco, how's it going? So first up, we're going to go with the standings again. First up is Mark Owen, dead last. He still got 40-33, 3-2 last week. Jared in fourth, 43-30, 3-2 last week. I dropped down to third, just barely, 49-24. Tim takes second, 41-20, 4-1 last week. He had a good week. And Will, still up at the top, 46-22. Between Will, Tim, and I, there is less than a 1% difference. So it's a very close up at the top, those top three. And overall, we're all 219, 129 overall, which is about 63% as a whole. So we picked a lot of games, all 5 of us. 16-9 last week. Here's an interesting stat I thought about this week. Last week was the first week that Jared picked 0% for college teams and then 100% in the NFL. It's the first ever time that's happened in a week of pick'ems, so that's kind of interesting. Tim has gone 34-11 in the last 9 weeks, 16-4 in the last 4 weeks, so that's pretty impressive. Will has gone 24-6 in the last 6 weeks, Clean sweeps are still 21-6, 78% there. And then that stat I talked about last week, those one-pick teams, where one of us picks a team that the rest of us doesn't. 9-14 overall. We had 4 of those last week. 1-3, Washington was the only team that was right in those circumstances, and that was the one that Tim picked. So, there you go.
All right, so a lot of interesting facts there. I'm the only one picking that team. The Vikings burned me last week, so hopefully that doesn't happen again. So with that, we're going to move into this week's pick'ems. So up first is number 17, Memphis, against number 10, Penn State in the Cotton Bowl on Saturday at 11 a.m. on ESPN. Tim's pick is Penn State. Paul, who do you have in this one?
Well, when I look at this matchup, I see 2 teams that have played, fairly good seasons, and but really what it comes down to this is, there was a little bit of controversy between Memphis and Boise State and Appalachian State for that group of 5 representative for the New Year's Six Bowl. And then the other day we saw Washington just completely dismantle Boise State. And I got to say that Penn State is probably on a higher level up than Washington right now. And so when I see that Memphis is being compared to Boise State, and then Washington takes care of Boise State like that, you got to go with Penn State in this scenario. I think it'll be a good game, but I think Penn State takes care of it in the late game.
All right, so Jared and Will also agree with you. Jared's pick is the Nittany Lions. Will also picks Penn State. And so for my pick, I do kind of agree with you that, if you're trying to compare Boise State and Memphis, although I think Memphis is a far superior team to Boise State. Boise State had a lot easier schedule in the Mountain West than Memphis did in the American. But I do have to agree with you just on the pick solely. I'm going with Penn State. I just think they're simply the better team than Memphis. But you know what that means? That's a clean sweep, so everyone put your money on Memphis. So now our second pick of the day, number 4 Oklahoma against number 1 LSU in the Peach Bowl college football semifinal, Saturday, 3 o'clock on ESPN. Tim's pick is LSU. Paul, who do you have in this one?
Well, first off, this is about the 3rd or 4th straight season that Oklahoma's made it to the playoffs. I'm not sure how many they have, but hats off to Coach Riley and his staff and what they've been able to do there with the talent they've got there. But let's be honest, LSU has played way better this season. I take a look at Oklahoma's schedule, and they pretty much squeaked by every game. They had to go down to the wire to beat Baylor twice. They only beat Iowa State by 1. They lost to Kansas State. Really close wins pretty much the whole season. The only couple blowouts they had were earlier on against teams they probably should have blown them out. The only way I can really say that LSU doesn't have an advantage is that they're one common opponent. They both beat Texas by 7, but then even that, LSU beat them on the road earlier in the season when Texas was a top 10 team. So really, everything points to LSU in this one. I got to go with the Tigers.
All right, so Jared is also going to go with LSU on that one. Will also picking the Tigers. In this one, it's a tough one. Oklahoma's a really solid team, but as you elaborated on, they've squeaked by a lot this season, while LSU has dominated even the toughest opponents, your Alabamas, your Auburns, your Floridas. So they've played really well. Obviously have Heisman Trophy winner Joe Burrow as their quarterback. But you know what? Oklahoma also has a Heisman Trophy candidate in Jalen Hurts. Quarterbacking for them, I think it comes down to the defense. Also, I think LSU has a superior defense, a more battle-tested defense that has played a lot of tough games in the SEC, while Oklahoma's defense has let a lot go in the Big 12, while the offense has barely won games for them, as you said. So for that, I'm going to go with LSU. Now, this is Oklahoma's third straight year in the college football playoffs, as you said, under Lincoln Riley. So there's a lot of experience on this team, but LSU has a lot of talent as well. So I'm going to have to go with the Tigers on this one. All right, so our next and last college football matchup of the day, number 3 Clemson against number 2 Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl college football semifinal. The other one, Saturday at 7 p.m. on ESPN. Tim is going with the Buckeyes on this one. Paul, who do you have?
Right, so I think this game is going to be a lot closer than the other one. We talked about the other semifinal game. In fact, I think, people are sleeping on Clemson a little bit. I don't think they'll win, but I do have Clemson having the lead going into the fourth quarter, and I think because Ohio State had to face some differences against Wisconsin in that Big Ten championship game, they have a little bit of experience coming from behind. I mean, that first quarter in that Big Ten championship was the first time this entire season that the Buckeyes went into a different quarter losing. So the fact that they had to face that little bit of adversity, they found a way to win, and they got the job done. That's going to be the difference at the end of the game. Ohio State's going to be able to respond, and Clemson will not. I got the Buckeyes.
Okay, so Jared DeHaan, up next in the picks, has also picked Ohio State. And then Will, with a bit of a difference of opinion, is going to pick Clemson. Now, a bit of a note on this. We have picked Ohio State games a lot this season. I believe maybe the 6th, 7th, maybe the 8th time we've had Ohio State on the show in the pick'ems. This is the first time on the podcast that anyone has ever picked against Ohio State all season. So Will going definitively with the Clemson Tigers. I cannot, however, I'm going to have to go with Ohio State. You look offensively with that awesome receiving core they have, but then the quarterbacking of Justin Fields has just improved immensely over the season. Obviously, in the regular season, 40 touchdowns to just 1 interception is phenomenal. But of course, J.K. Dobbins, another 1,000-yard rushing season in the backfield, and Chase Young and Jeff Okudah anchoring a tremendous defense. I just cannot pick against the Buckeyes, as I haven't been able to all season. So with that, we're going to move into our NFL pick'ems. First game of the NFL picks, the Tennessee Titans at the Houston Texans. Sunday at 3:30 on CBS. Tim's pick is the Tennessee Titans. Paul, who do you have in this one?
Well, I gotta say, Marco, this has got to be the hardest pick I've ever had to make on this show. I mean, these two teams are so inconsistent, and it seems like every year something crazy happens on week 17. So just the fact that these teams are so close, I mean, we just picked them 2 weeks ago, and it was hard then. Now we got to do it again. I think, the numbers are really close. They're all within like 20 yards of each other. But I think the difference for me is that the Titans are desperate for a win. They really need to win this game to help their playoff chances to get themselves into the playoffs. And the Texans are already locked in, so there might be a little bit lax. I went with the Titans last time. They lost, but it was only a 3-point loss. I'm going to go with the Titans again on the road. I think that they're going to have a little bit more desire to win this game, and just because it means more to them, I'm going to go with Tennessee.
All right, so Jared on that one is going to have to go with the Texans, and Will also go with the Texans on this one. My pick will have to be the Tennessee Titans. I just overall think they're the better team. Even though the Texans beat them last time, I think the Titans, especially if they get Derrick Henry back in time and healthy, I think they have the better talent overall, and I think the better coaching. I think Mike Vrabel is a better coach than Bill O'Brien is. Ryan Tannehill has played pretty amazing over this stretch, even enough to probably get him a contract with the Titans in the offseason. The Texans, of course, Deshaun Watson is probably the superior quarterback, but I simply think that the Titans defense and skill position players can overcome the deficit against the Texans and get Tennessee the win. So now moving on to our final pick'em of the episode, the San Francisco 49ers at the Seattle Seahawks, Sunday at 7:15 on NBC. Tim has the San Francisco 49ers. Paul, who do you have in this one?
Well, this game is going to be close. There's no doubt about it. Their last matchup was very close. I mean, it came down to a field goal in overtime. Seattle won it. But really, things have gone differently for these two teams since then. You look back, you disregard that Atlanta loss for the 49ers, and they've really looked good. I mean, they had one of the hardest 3 or 4 game stretches there. They dominated against Green Bay. They went into New Orleans and won on the road. And then they took care of the Rams last week, who just beat Seattle a couple weeks ago. And then that 3-point loss to Baltimore, I think, is huge. Baltimore's been unstoppable, dominating every team, and they only beat 49ers by 3 at home. I really think this 49ers defense is stepping up, and they're a lot better. I know that Seattle's got Russell Wilson, but this 49ers defense is only allowing 19 points a game this season. That is really good when we talk about the NFL, because you can get. And so, really, with that said, it'll be a close game, but just, Seattle just has not been doing that great lately. Like I said, they lost to the Rams a few weeks ago by a couple of scores. They lost to Arizona last week by a couple of scores at home. And then they, had a struggle win against the Panthers, who we've known their season's just been crumbling this year. I just don't see the Seattle Seahawks pulling it together. I've got to go with the 49ers.
All right, so Jared is going to have to disagree with you. He's going to pick the Seattle Seahawks in this one. Once again, as will Will. So we'll see if Will is affected by the DeHaan curse, as he's also going to go with the Seahawks. So they're both picking the same NFL teams. They both picked the Texans. They both picked the Seahawks. Once again, I'm going to have to disagree with Jared and Will. I'm going to go with the San Francisco 49ers. For all the reasons you said, that they've toughed out a lot of wins. I know Seattle is a really solid team, but they're injury depleted. They did just get Marshawn Lynch back, but who knows what kind of playing shape he's in, how quickly he can figure out the playbook. He's only got a handful of days to, be in the team setting and figure things out. Who knows if he will even play in this Week 17 matchup. So that's a variable in this equation. But overall, I think, as you said, the 49ers, the way they performed against Green Bay, New Orleans, and Baltimore are all factors in deciding that I think the San Francisco 49ers will very easily beat the Seahawks, who are very injury depleted and just got beat pretty badly by the Arizona Cardinals last weekend. So with that, I'm going to go with the San Francisco 49ers. And that is it for this episode's pick'ems and the episode as a whole. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your own unqualified opinions down below. Also, don't forget to ring the bell to get notifications and to check us out on Spotify. So thank you so much for joining us for episode 15. That's all, and we will see you all next time.